with my great friend, Enric Sala. Enric, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Hey, Paul. Good to see you.
It's
Thank
so
you for
great.
organizing
I'm
this.
also bringing in my other friend, David Shukman. And this, David, welcome.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Enric. Great
Hello,
to see you.
David.
Hi.
It's amazing because everybody watching, we've got people watching from 82 countries, and I just heard maybe 83 countries because we're counting fast. The numbers are everywhere, thousands of people. Just to let you all know that Enric and I, we work together at sea. Enric is the founder of Pristine Seas and National Geographic Explorer in residence. But to paraphrase Enric, he's not a very good resident explorer. He likes to be an explorer out there, I reckon, mostly at sea. And he's the founder of the Pristine Seas project, and I lead the expeditions for those. And David Shukman Enric is a geographer, fellow of the Royal Geographical Society. David is a geographer.
True.
And he's the science editor for BBC. Long term, really, solid career in journalism and the most trusted voice, I think, in Science Matters, David. We love you.
Well, thank you very much. That's nice.
I remember being on stage with you at the Royal Geographical Society.
Yeah, that was a great treat.
Time ago,
I learned
and hopefully next time we meet, it won't be on a computer screen. It will be somewhere exciting. And another little snippet is David is my partner in unicycle riding. So there you go, everybody. The secret is out, David.
I know, but I'm very nervous. I'm going to confess that right away. I have not let go of the walls. So that'll come.
Well, it'll help, Dave, for you to know that I'm hugely confident, but I've got the bruises to prove it. Okay, everybody. Well, during this whole adventure, which is called the Global Biodiversity Set, I've had this on the desk the whole time, because every once in a while I've had to sort of think, how do I understand that? How do I phrase that? What can I do about this element? What is this person saying? It's been the trick. And so Enric's book and the fact that we managed to get David available and set the hook into Enric led to this session. And it's just a simple session. You put two great minds together in a room, thousands of miles apart, and see what happens. So there you go, gentlemen. There's 83 countries, untold thousands of people. The floor is yours. I'll see you in about 20 minutes. Have fun.
Paul, what a great introduction. And it's a huge privilege, actually, to meet Enric. I know it's an e-meeting, and to have this chance to talk. I hugely enjoyed the book. I endorse everything Paul said about it. It's a book you need to keep by your side because there's so much in it. And look, there's a lot to discuss. I've got a million questions, but there's one that's just kind of eating at me. Do you know, sometimes you read a book and there are great messages in it, there's important stuff, but one detail just chews away. And I love your enchanting description of being in Corsica and you're trying to go diving, but the weather's bad, and you're with your colleagues. And when the weather's too bad to dive, you go up into the mountains to the oak forest and you look for mushrooms. And I just love that image of this team of scientists, marine scientists, poking around in the oak trees, looking for their favorite mushrooms. So this is a really key question. I got my pen ready. How did you cook them? I want to know what's your recipe? And I'm going to write this down.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for the hyperbolic introduction. And David, it's such a pleasure talking to you. You are such a giant. So I'm really, really honored to be talking with you today. And yeah, our my colleagues and I who used to work in Corsica, we are naturalists, right? We work mostly in the sea, but we love forests too. And of course, being Catalan, we are a gatherer.
Great
culture.
Food.
So,
also
so
great food culture.
It depends on the mushrooms, but in the oak forest of Corsica, we collect the ceps, the boletus, and also the orange, the scissors mushroom, also the rossignols. So there are different ways of doing them. We saute them, we have them in pasta, we marinate them very thin slices. So we try several different ways to bring some diversity to the mycological diversity of the island.
Well, it's just a lovely thing, and I'm so glad you've answered that. Though, I mean, there's so much in your book that I think we learn about you. I mean, there's you, the scientist, there's you, the advocate and campaigner, but there's as you as the human being. And one of many episodes I really enjoy, and I'd love you to talk us through, is when you were crazy about diving as a young guy, and you described that beautifully. But then there's a special moment, I think, if I read this right, when you first dived in a marine reserve off an island off, I guess, Barcelona. And there was something very different and very enriching about that experience. And I'd love you to share that with all of us.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau's documentaries on TV. Right?
We all did, yeah.
Two TV channels, and Sunday night, that was it. Everybody, the entire family was glued to the TV. And Cousteau showed us this unbelievable abundance of marine life from all these places around the world. But then I went swimming in the Mediterranean Sea, in the Costa Brava, and there was nothing. No sea urchins, barren grounds, and the biggest fish was something like this. No dolphins, groupers, or seals, and whales, nothing. But then when I turned 18 and I got my diving license, then I did the first dive ever in the Medas Islands Marine Reserve. And as soon as I put my head underwater, I felt like I was diving in one of Jacques Cousteau's documentaries. Because everything he had showed us from the past that was absent from the sea of my childhood was there. All the big fish, the scorpion fish, the big groupers, the sea breams, octopus. It was wow. It was like traveling to the past, like traveling back in time. And then I realized, wow, this is what I was missing. So the entire Mediterranean Sea was like this.
So that was like the first, we say, the penny dropping, that if you have a reserve, it just transforms everything.
It was not the penny dropping; it was the entire bank account dropping. And it was, that was one of my epiphanies. I said, "Wow, how much of this we have." And today, on the Catalan coast, it's 200 kilometers of coast or more, and there are only 2.5 square kilometers protected.
Right. So actually, that puts it in perspective. I mean, I guess you've got the competing demands of a massive interest in seafood. And we were hearing from Sylvia just now that, we don't see seafood as sort of being wild. And of course, a lot of chefs are very famous in that part of the world for creating incredible dishes from seafood. But that's striking that such a small area is earmarked as a marine reserve.
Yeah, well, globally, less than 3% of the ocean is fully protected from fishing and other damaging activities. But we know that when you protect places, our research shows that the abundance of fish increases 600% relative to unprotected areas nearby. And when the fish come back, the divers come in. So this marine reserve in Catalonia, the Medas Islands, it's only 1 square kilometer, but it has so many big groupers and other fish. So divers from all over Europe fly to Barcelona, and then they drive to the Costa Brava to dive there. And the Catalan government had to limit the number of dives because there were too many people and they were destroying the organisms that grow on the bottom. And you hear, there are too many divers. I said, no. There is huge demand. The problem is not that there are too many divers. There are not too many people who want to see wild nature. The problem is that we have too few marine reserves.
Yes, that's an
where
interesting.
People can see what the sea was like, and spread across a larger area. This is what the political leaders don't get.
And I guess all of those divers who go down into those incredibly abundant, fertile depths and will come away with amazing stories and maybe spread the word back home in their own countries, which leads me to ask about another, I think, kind of incredibly revealing episode in your book, which is where it's a pristine seas expedition off the coast of Gabon. And, there's incredible sea creatures there, and you're doing your research. And then you get the president of Gabon to come onto the ship, and you need to convince him that it's worth creating a marine reserve in this area. And you give him the controls, which actually I would love, of a remotely operated vehicle to go down, and so he can see for himself what's special. And I think it's a very powerful image that you persuaded a politician, senior guy, just by giving him the opportunity to really see what was there. That must have been an amazing experience.
It was really great, because after 1 hour on board, he was looking at his watch, like, oh, we had given him a PowerPoint and show him videos of, we had been partnering with Ted Wade, my partner and friend Ted Wade of the Wade Foundation, who gave us his expedition vessel for 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks exploring all the coast of Gabon from Congo to Equatorial Guinea, we collected all these images of these unique marine habitats and big fish and sharks around oil platforms. And, we put together this little video, and it was, wow, so exciting. And yes, and we told him about that, but then he looks at his watch and said, we're going to lose him. But then the dive safety officer of the ship said, why don't we let him drive the remote operated vehicle? And he loved it. And he found all these big groupers in a place that it was a sandy bottom. We were on top of a sandy seamount, but we saw a dark thing there at the distance, and he drove the ROV to that place and then put it down. And then these big dogtooth groupers came.
Hang on, Enric. How was the president driving this expensive machine? I mean, you must have been quite nervous while he was doing it.
Oh, he's good. He's good. He's he's good at piloting. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. But this is something that we always try to do. When you get somebody to one of these wild places, it's impossible that they don't fall in love with them, right?
Sure.
So when we can, and a few times we've brought ministers or presidents or prime ministers with us to the field. Usually they come for a day, but that day is transformational. But if they cannot come, then we bring the places to them, right, through our films. And sometimes a VR. I have a photo of a Latin American president on his rotating chair in his office with a VR, looking at turtles and sharks. Oh, look at it! Oh my God, look at it! So nothing like first-hand experience, as you know very well.
Yeah, Jane Goodall is quoted as saying that you've got to, if you're in any conservation effort, you've got to appeal to the heart, not the head. And I guess that was a revealing moment for you about that. You
need both, right? When I was a professor at the university, I thought that we needed to appeal to the head. But then when I joined National Geographic and started talking to country leaders, I realized that we had to reverse things. We had to put the heart first and then the head. Okay. So we make leaders fall in love with these places. And then they will ask, oh, wow, this is fantastic. We need to do something about it. What about the fishing industry? Okay, so here's the report, right, of what's going on here. And what about how much is it going to cost, right? Well, here's the economic analysis that you're going to actually make more money than you're going to spend in this place. So we need to provide both. Just the heart, it doesn't work. Just the appealing to the heart doesn't get anything protected. You need to have a strategy. You need to have a serious scientific and economic reporting to make sure that to satisfy the people at the government agencies who are the ones who have to do the work of establishing these areas.
So those numbers, that hard work, all that research, that underpins the I guess that makes the business case effectively, or the political case, but the engagement is essential as well, I guess.
No, absolutely. Yes, because how many conservation NGOs go to government agencies with reports and literature reviews and dry technical documents? Or in most cases that this doesn't go anywhere. But when you have that emotional connection, and then the key decision maker realizes that I need to do something about this, and then those rational arguments have a use. Otherwise, it's just reports that are going to sit on somebody's desk.
Or in the bin if you're really unlucky, I guess. So there's another angle here. I mean, there's so many. For those who haven't read The Nature of Nature, do get it. But I mean, there's another episode I adored because it's about a journalist. So I felt a kind of kinship. You're describing a very high-level conference, academics, scientists discussing biodiversity in San Diego, I think, and 3 days of technical presentations. And at the end of it, a brilliant journalist, a journalist who asks a brilliant question, I don't know her, puts up her hand, and I love it when this happens. I think we journalists pride ourselves on asking a question that goes to the heart of an issue. She says, I've heard all this stuff, but I still don't know, why does biodiversity matter? I mean, what is the benefit of having so many different species? And I love your description of, actually, you scientists scratched your head and said, well, we haven't really worked that out, and had to do 2 or 3 years of research to come up with the answer. But you did come up with an answer, and so you've actually done the work that journalist effectively asked you to do. Tell me about what were the headline findings of that piece of work about, if you like, the scientific rationale for biodiversity.
Yes, scientists, journalists can be a little tricky sometimes, you know.
I hope we try not to be, but now and again, you know.
So yeah, no, that is a very interesting case, because the paper was about the role of marine biodiversity in the benefits that the ocean gives us. Right? The ocean gives us food, regulates the climate, controls disease, protects the coastal zone from the destructive effect of storms, etc., etc. Right? There are so many benefits that we get from marine life, and what we found was that the more biodiversity you have, the more species you have in a place, the more complex that ecosystem is, the more mature and healthy. Right? Because there are places that have a small number of species, just because, you know, the Arctic has less species than the coast of Indonesia, just purely for biogeographical, for ecological reasons. But the more mature an ecosystem is, the more benefits it provides to us and the rest of life on the planet. And when we destroy that biodiversity, those benefits decline. And when we restore that biodiversity with marine protected areas, those benefits are restored. So that was it, right? Look, all these benefits we get because we have biodiversity. Mm-hmm. Without biodiversity, forget it. That was the headline on our minds. But the journalists picked up one sentence in the paper, which was that if we project the current decline of fish stocks, most commercial fisheries will collapse by 2048. So that was the one thing that was not the core message of the paper, that actually became headlines all over the world.
Yeah. Well, we like zeroing in on small print. So look, I'm going to ask you about something. So yesterday, and this is in relation to the protecting 30% by 2030 initiative, that yesterday there was a meeting of G7 environment ministers, and they actually, in their communique, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this, they endorsed that principle. Now, there is a little phrase that goes with that endorsement, and I just wonder what your thoughts are about actually whether having those politicians from those 7 countries provide kind of a political stamp on this idea, this concept, whether that's significant, or whether you would kind of remain cautious to see what other countries are going to do, to see actually what the G7 are really going to do about it. Where do you, I mean, the cynic in me as a journalist says, well, let's wait to see.
Yes, no, I am very optimistic, because it's not just the 7 countries. There is a group of 60 nations now, and the European Commission, the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, 60 countries in the European Commission supporting 30% of the planet protected by 2030. Land, 30% of the land, 30% of the ocean. Some of these countries have already made commitments, financial commitments, like the UK or the European Commission. That 30 by 30 is part of the European Green Deal. Mm-hmm. It's now law in Europe. It's a law that the European Union has to become carbon neutral by 2050. And that includes reducing emissions and protecting and restoring nature to be able to draw down the excess carbon pollution from the atmosphere. There are other countries that are in this group that are going to make financial commitments very soon. And this year, in October, we have the Conference of the Parties, the COP15 of the Convention on Biodiversity, Convention on Nature. It's kind of the parallel convention to the Climate Convention. In 2015, we had the Paris Climate Agreement. In 2021, we're going to have the Kunming, because it's going to happen in China, in the city of Kunming. We'll have the Kunming Agreement on Nature. And that agreement, hopefully, will include that 30 by 30 target. Some of these countries have already protected 30% of their waters or their lands already. Some have already plans. Canada has a fantastic plan to get to 25 by 25 and 30 by 30. The UK has protected most of its overseas territories. The US has protected 26% of the exclusive economic zone, mostly in these remote islands in the Pacific, in fully protected areas. So these countries most of them are already on the way to 30 by 30. And the announcement yesterday was very important because we have 7 of the richest countries in the world committing to this, including countries like Japan, which was not known for its environmental ocean practices, but now it's a supporter of 30% of the ocean protected by 2030. So yes, I am very optimistic. There is great momentum right now.
That's really great to hear, and it's lovely to hear that you sense there's momentum behind this, that it is going somewhere. I mean, nevertheless, sorry, I'm just going to ask, because I am a journalist, I'm going to ask one more time, will you still be looking out for, I mean, you mentioned the 60 countries, will you be looking out for maybe others, some of those 60s not delivering what they promise? I mean, this has been the great pattern. You mentioned climate change and Paris. You know, over many decades, there have been discussions about climate change and actually not much happening. Now things are a bit different. But with 30 by 30, do you trust everything you're told?
Well, the experience dealing with humans who care about their national interest rather than the global interest, historically has been, suggests that it's very unlikely that every country in the world is going to commit and deliver, right?
Okay.
This 30% target is not a national target. No, that doesn't mean that every country has to protect 30% of their waters and land. This is a global target. And there are areas that are more important than others for biodiversity and for climate, because we need to remember that the two things are linked. We talk about carbon neutrality. And what does that mean? It means that we need to reduce carbon emissions, and we need to draw down much of the carbon pollution in the atmosphere and in the water. Well, we are not going to go to zero emissions because it would be very difficult to get to zero emissions, including aviation, for example, or shipping by 2050, which means that we're going to reduce our emissions as much as possible. And then those emissions will have to be sequestered by the best technology. And the best technology is called trees, grasslands, wetlands, mangroves, healthy ocean ecosystems. So that's why we need to reduce emissions. And at the same time, we need to protect whatever wild is left on the planet, because right now what we have is not enough. It's not sufficient to absorb our impacts, and restore much of our degraded lands and oceans, because it's the only technology we have to get us out of this mess that we ourselves made.
That's really clearly described, Enric. Thank you. Look, I know I'm keeping an eye on the time here. I'm sure Paul's waiting in the wings. Let me ask you just one more quick brief one. For people who maybe live in cities, who don't get the opportunity to dive or get much experience of wild places, what's the one thing they could do to contribute to this agenda? Is there like one thing you would suggest?
Green your city. I am in Washington, D.C., in this wonderful neighborhood of Woodley Park now. It's so green. There are so many trees, little parks, birds everywhere. I'm so happy. I feel so much healthier than I lived in Midtown Manhattan, for example, right? And London, for example, is a national park city,
quite
right?
Green.
A big percentage of London is green. So, and there is a new research that came out just 2 weeks ago showing that if the big cities, if cities were greened, if there was more nature, more trees, more parks in cities, if we were able to turn some of those degraded urban areas into little pockets of biodiversity, which is relatively easy to do, those pockets would absorb 1/5 of the carbon emissions from cities. And cities are the biggest, hotspots of carbon emissions on the planet. So there you go. It will work for people's health. It will work for the quality of the air. It will work for crime also, because in areas that are greener, there is actually less crime than in gray areas. And also it would help us suck in some of that excess carbon pollution from the atmosphere. So green your city.
That's a lovely image. Enric, thank you very, very much. It's been a huge pleasure to talk to you. There's so much to discuss. We could do hours, I think. And
let's do that separately, David.
I hope we will in person. So, Paul, I'm going to hand back to you if you're waiting in the wings.
I'll tell you,
and delighted to have been asked to do this. It's been a real treat.
Well, just to sit back and just, watch and hear you gentlemen have that great discussion. That's the second thing we can do. We can green our cities.
Yeah.
And we've had some great discussions here on Global Biodiversity Festival about tiny forests, the tiny forest projects that seem to work so well. And the second thing that everyone should do is make sure, please do hang on to this recording. All of these sessions are recorded, everybody, and they're held in a permanent archive on YouTube and, of course, on Joe Grabowski's globalbiofest.com site. So you can go back in, and if you ever need direction, pick up Enric's book, Green Your Cities, and then get a nice cup of tea and look at this session and just sit back and enjoy it. It's absolutely the right direction.
And also, Paul, don't forget to head off to the forest and pick some mushrooms. And
oh yeah, forest mushrooms.
Look
I like the forest mushrooms.
The Catalan recipes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. I mean, everybody's busy. There's so much draw and pressure on us all to work online. So it means an awful lot that you've joined us, and we're in support of Joe Grabowski and his amazing team. He's the international orchestra conductor. I don't quite know how he does it.
You know what? Look, I've been in and out over the last day or so, and I couldn't believe my luck at seeing the northern white rhinos in Kenya, and then crossing to the treetops in Costa Rica live. I mean, it was a great achievement.
I could speak to my old research station, Rothera, in Antarctica this morning, so that was great.
I missed that, but I'll look it up. Fantastic.
There you go. 82 countries, all 7 continents, 160 speakers, thousands of people, and you two gentlemen acting as our lighthouse, our waypoint on where we're going to go next. What do we do with all this? Follow David and Enric. That's the trick.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both very much.
Absolutely. Yeah, bravo. Thank you so much.
Paul. Cheers.